If you are looking for a video that very briefly analyzes this poem in its entirety, then I'm afraid this is not the video for you, because any video that claims to analyze this properly in a very short space of time is simply not doing it properly and not giving the poem the justice it deserves. Somewhere I've Never Traveled, sometimes entitled Somewhere I've Never Traveled Gladly Beyond by EE Cummings. Wow, what a beautiful poem, but not a very easy poem to analyze. Arguably the most difficult poem you'll do in your school career. And what makes the poem quite difficult is not only the content and trying to understand it, but the use of EE Cummings' unconventional syntax, which made him idiosyncratic. It was particular to him, and a lot of poets at the time criticized him for this style, this ungrammar as we call it. When you look at a line and you'll think to yourself, but that doesn't make grammatical sense, that's not grammatically written correctly. Other poets, if I'm not mistaken, T.S. Eliot, congratulated Cummings and said that it was great that he had found his own style and had written in a way that made him unique in a sense. So that is what makes the poem slightly difficult to understand. But anyway, let's just have a look, and I'm going to use my annotated notes. And as I say, this is not like the only interpretation or an analysis that's like 100% complete, because it is such a complex poem. There are a number of variations out there about what this means, what that means. But what I'm going to try and do is I'm going to teach you what is the most conventional understanding, the most wildly, or should I say, generally accepted understanding of the poem. Okay, so it's a love poem, and I've written there, although it's somewhat unconventional, because it's not the kind of way you would go about speaking to somebody that you love. Notice as well that, not that this is going to be assessed or anything, but can you imagine having written 2,900 poems in your life? That is an incredible number of poems, and they have put there that he uses this unconventional syntax being the way words are put together to form sentences. Okay, Somewhere I've Never Traveled Gladly Beyond, and I assume that you have read this poem already, so you do have a basic understanding of what is said. Notice there's no capital letters, first of all, not for the first word or for the first person pronoun I. Somewhere I've never traveled gladly beyond any experience. The fact that that thought runs from that line onto the next tells me that there is enjambment happening here. Enjambment run on lines. Okay, so this part of the poem, or the whole poem essentially, is the speaker as if he was whispering to the lady that he loves. Okay? Somewhere I have never traveled gladly beyond any experience. I've never experienced anything like this. And I'm going on a journey, right? But it's not a physical journey. I'm staring into your eyes and I'm looking into your soul here. Okay? You're taking me somewhere I've never been before. I've never been there. An emotional journey. But I'm glad to be going on it. I'm happy to be going, right? Beyond any experience, never experienced it before, your eyes have their silence. And then we've got a colon there, almost as if like you're going to introduce now what the eyes are saying. Okay, or to elaborate more on the power that you have over me. And this whole poem is all about the power that this lady has on the speaker. And he can't actually explain it. He says, in your most frail gesture, in your most subtle gesture, whatever that may be, whether it's with your eyes or your hands or whatever, there are things which enclose me. And I've written there, all she has to do is make a small gesture and he's under her control. Now, enclose, like, okay, trap. So there's something, you just have to do a little something, and this power that you have over me encloses me. It's like I have no choice of the matter. It just happens. Or which I cannot touch because they are too near. Now that is a paradox, because surely if something is too near, How can you not touch it? I can understand not being able to touch something that's too far, too far away. But if something's too near, why can't I touch it? So that is a paradox. And now a little bit of controversy around what that line means. We are saying, is it because they are a part of him? Is it because it's beyond his control? Maybe he's used to being in control of his life and everything that happens to him, but now her power over him, it's too near. It's like he can't control it. Or maybe, as I said there, it's because the influence that she has over him is now like it's becoming part of him. You can't control like something because now it's like inside me. Okay, but the fact that we can't actually understand this line just emphasizes this mysterious power of his lover that she has over him. All right, and I've written there surrounded. Okay, just keep that in mind. Next stanza. Your slightest look easily will unclose me. So we've said here that there's a little weak kind of subtle gesture that she can do that will close him up. Or perhaps the slightest look that she gives him opens him up emotionally. Okay, so there's a contrast there. Though I have closed myself as fingers, you open always petal by petal, myself as spring opens touchfully, skillfully, mysteriously, her first rose. Okay, let's have a look at that. So I've said here surrounded, in other words, things that are too near to him, and then also the ability for her to close him up. All right, and then in this stanza here I've said open because now we've gone from closed to open, unclosing me. Even though the speaker says, I chose to close myself emotionally, okay, as fingers. So like if you've got your fingers and you close to form a fist, okay, he says, I did that myself. That was my decision. And of course, this being a simile here. However, you open me. So even though I made the decision to close, your power is so great that it's beyond my control, and you open me up. Okay, you open always do it to me, petal by petal. Now you can imagine a bud of a flower and then the petals starting to open, right? So petal by petal. There's also a talk about, when you're a child and you've got a flower with lots of petals, and you pull one off. She loves me not. She loves me not. Maybe it's like petal by petal. You open me. There's no open, close. It's just like you open me, no matter what. How? As spring opens her first rose. So a rose, like there'll be no flower, right? And then as soon as spring arrives, somehow mysteriously, we can't understand how, this rose opens, this bud opens, right? So for us, it's like we can't understand why nature has this ability to do that. I mean, we can have really hot days in winter and the flower bud is still closed. Yet for some reason, nature just knows when spring is around the corner. Even if the first of spring is like a really cold, rainy day, the buds still start opening. Okay, so we can't understand that. Not only is it skillfully done, but it's mysterious. How the hell do flowers do that? So it's the same as I don't understand how you're able to open me up like this. It's mysterious. These brackets here, almost like the speaker's thoughts, whereas the rest of it's like he's speaking to her. Okay. And I've said they're opening up emotionally like a flower opens in spring. Also notice that spring is the first capitalized word that we see, and spring, Cummings just loved spring so much he often wrote about it, and he loved nature and beauty. So maybe that's his way of showing his respect for spring. And I put there, spring is as skillful as the listener being the lady that he is in love with. There is another train of thought that goes about this. Could be his daughter, because he wrote it when his daughter had just been born, blah blah blah. But I think that's going off on a bit of a stretch. It's too far of a tangent, so let's rather not go there. Let's rather keep it to his lover. Okay, moving on. Oh yes, look, notice the unusual syntax. You open always petal by petal myself. That doesn't really make sense. You would rather say something like, you open me petal by petal always as spring opens, you know. So there you can see that ungrammar, as we call it. It's not written like grammatically sound correctly. Okay, or if your wish be to close me, so again, closing me again. So if your wish, in other words, it's like your wish is my command, I'll do whatever you want me to do. Um, I and my life will shut very beautifully suddenly. Okay, so if that is what you want, my emotions, my whole life, I will do that. And I'll do it beautifully and suddenly. It's beautiful because it's what you want. And I'll do it quickly, suddenly, because that's what you want me to do. So he's saying, you know what? If that's what you want, I'm okay with that. I'm happy to do that. As when the heart of this flower imagines the snow carefully everywhere descending. Okay, so the heart, you know, if you love somebody, you say you love them with their heart. You know, that's what you draw, a heart, even though it's got nothing to do with the actual organ, but that's the connotations of the heart. So it warns of the bitter cold coming, like plants know when winter is approaching. So the heart of mine, of this flower, because we're talking about opening and closing here, petal by petal, blah blah blah, imagines the snow carefully everywhere descending. So if it gets cold, right, the flower bud will close up again to protect itself. Okay, so it's like the flower will imagine that there's snow falling everywhere because it's cold, so it closes itself up. So I similarly will close myself up. But notice that, remember when I said here that he's okay with that, he's saying, but I will watch that snow falling. Even though it's cold, I'll watch it carefully everywhere descending. There's no diction there. There are no words there which suggest that he hates that. That the fact that he would have to close because of the snow. He's okay with that. He's happy with that. All right. Then this stanza, which is probably the most difficult to understand, at least the last part of it. Nothing which we are to perceive in this world equals the power of your intense fragility. Okay, that's not too bad. Let's look at that. All right. There's nothing in this world that we can understand, that, right, that is equal to this incredible power that you have over me. Of your intense, it's very strong, fragility, fragile, delicateness, weakness. Okay, so there's nothing in this world that can be compared to this incredible mysterious strength that you have in your intense fragility. And I suppose power and fragility is a bit of a paradox, because usually something that's fragile is not powerful. And also intense fragility, you wouldn't expect something to be fragile to be intense as well, you know. Now moving on, whose texture compels me with the color of its countries, rendering death and forever with each breathing. All right, okay, so he's trying to compare her nature, the fact that she has this intense fragility, right, with texture. And it compels me, it brings about a force with the color of its countries. So when I think about your nature, it has a texture that brings about me the color. Now, this figure of speech in these two lines here is what we call synesthesia. Now, synesthesia is a figure of speech which involves the mixing of the emotions. So, let's say, for example, you have a memory, and in your memory you imagine a scene, this, kind of like a deja vu, right? You have this picture in your mind. But it's so, like, when you think of that scene, you smell something. Because maybe when you were 5 years old, you were at the scene and there was somebody with you, a lady wearing perfume, and she gave off a strong smell, and you can still smell it. You've taken texture here, which is touch, and you've added color, which is sight. So you've mixed two senses, synesthesia. Now the one idea is that There's nothing in the whole world, in all these countries, in all the different colors, whether it's green forests, white snow, yellow desert, etc. There's nothing in the world that can be compared to your intense fragility, right? The other notion or idea is that he can see, if you could see every country, that there was, and the earth was not round, which it is. Can we just move on from that? And you could see every country, right? The colors of those countries, it's like a beautiful vista. That is what he is seeing. The idea here is that she has incredible power. She's incredibly delicate but powerful and beautiful. All right? And of course we can talk about alliteration there, CCC. So this texture that she has, which compels him, makes death and forever with each breathing. All right. So it's like you have control over me in this life. You have control of me even when I'm dead. And you have control forever. Okay, so for eternity you have this control over me, and no one can ever deny or ridicule your power of intense fragility. It's just amazing. Okay. And I've written there, it's as if she's a goddess because she has so much power. You don't talk about human beings having after death and forever and stuff. It's like when a human dies, he or she is dead. Okay, so moving on. Difficult stanza, but let's move on. I do not know what it is about you that closes and opens. Okay, that's pretty self-explanatory, but notice the brackets. Brackets we use in British English, and parenthesis is what we use in American English. I do not know what it is about you. I can't understand what it is that makes you open and close me emotionally like you do. All right, it's beyond my understanding, beyond my control, cannot be defined. It's like if you love somebody, how do you actually define love? You can't really. And what I've put there in the red on the right side here is he's been trying to figure out what it is that gives her so much power over him, but he just has no idea. He says, only something in me understands the voice of your eyes is deeper than all roses. So as I said, the brackets here telling me the speaker's private thoughts. This is not what he would be saying to her. This is what he would be thinking. He says, I'll never understand. There's only a little bit of something inside me which understands. The voice of your eyes is deeper than all roses. So the only thing that I understand, the only thing that I know for sure is that the power that you have is deeper than all roses. You're more beautiful, you're more important than anything. And of course it's appropriate there that we use roses because we've been talking about opening and closing this flower and spring opening its first rose, etc., etc. Going back there, talking about spring opening a first rose, notice that's her first rose, so there's personification of spring there, which I have written, but I didn't mention at the time. Okay, coming back here, going along. Right, and we're going to finish off the poem now. Nobody, not even the rain. So we've got nobody, right? Now nobody is pretty final, like nobody, not one person, okay? But just to emphasize, Cummings just wants to emphasize to what extent there is nothing, no one like you. The speaker says not. So we've got two negatives next to each other for emphasis here. Nobody, not even the rain, has such small hands. And as I said, E.E. Cummings was fascinated by nature. He loved nature. He spent quite a lot of time in Paris there, observing the beauty of the city and nature. So if he can bring in that beauty into his poems, he will do, and that's exactly what he's done here when he's bringing in the flowers and spring and rain. So now if you think about rain, right, and personifying rain again by saying it has small hands, rain will fall and lightly touch the flowers, the leaves will just kind of flip a little bit, the rose will just take slightly little taps by the rain, right? It's very gentle. So he's saying not even the rain which is pretty, mysterious. It's also something that's quite like godly. Not even the rain has as small a hands as you do. So the rain touches gently, but your touch is just intense fragility beyond anything else. So gentle, right? And I said there, her power is subtle, but very, very strong. She has the ability to open and close the speaker more deftly than the rain can open and close a rose. And as I mentioned, the ungrammar works in this poem because he is so confused. And that is it, guys. That is the analysis of Somewhere I've Never Traveled, Gladly Beyond. Not an easy poem, but wow, so well written, and truly what a beautiful poem.